Hi there. I am Dr. Kanika Bell, and I am an associate professor in the psychology department at Clark Atlanta University. So I got very excited when I was asked to talk a little bit about how to write an abstract for your research presentations and for your research papers. I have been taking students to conferences for almost 20 years now, and I've seen tons and tons and tons of abstracts come through the pike. And I thought it would be great to break down what you should be thinking about when you're writing it and how to write the abstract, because it's like a first impression. It is the first thing that people will experience when they are encountering your research. So first, what is an abstract? What is it in general, right? It is a brief summary of a research paper, right? It is typically 150 to 250 words, and it helps the reader understand the purpose and the results of your work, right? You are providing a very small glimpse of the entirety of your research paper when you are writing an abstract. Imagine a window dressing if you are shopping, in a store. The outside of what's presented in the window is what makes you go into it, right? Imagine a menu item, and it tells you a little bit about the ingredients and what you're going to be eating. That is how you decide what to order. Think about that in terms of thinking about the abstract that you have for your research paper. So what's the purpose of it? It's providing a bit of a snapshot of the research. It is not just kind of like a background of why you did the research paper, right? That might be somewhere, right, when you are presenting it, but that is not included in the abstract. Remember, you only have a certain amount of words, so you really have to budget your words effectively. So you are really trying to just hit the major points. We'll talk about what those major points are in just a second. Why do we use abstracts? They are used in databases. If you are in the middle of writing your research paper currently, or you have written one previously, then you often just use the abstract. You might not even utilize the entire research paper when you are looking for references and looking for information to complete your introductions and literature reviews, right? So the abstract really has to pack a punch in a very small, number of sentences or words. They are also used for search engines, so you have to make sure that you are thinking about particular keywords, and especially in these times. Like I said, I've been teaching for 20 years. Over those 20 years, of course, social media and online databases have become the kind of go-to for discovering where you can find, particular research papers. So with that being said, thinking about the words that you choose, if you're writing about, like I write about a number of things, but one of them is Black women's identity, right? So I'm very careful about popular, words and catchphrases like intersectionality, things like that, to describe my research. And I want to include that in my abstract so that when people are using Google Scholar or they are looking for information, my work will come up, right? Because it uses keywords that are being popularly used by people who are examining those topics, right? And then of course you are using it for conference submissions. Now your abstract for a conference submission is literally making the difference between you presenting at that conference or not. They are not reading your entire paper. They are looking through that abstract and they're trying to get a sense on whether or not this is research worthy of being presented at the national, regional, or even school conference to which you are applying. But largely, your abstract helps researchers decide whether they're going to read this full paper or not. You know, it's like watching a movie trailer. If the movie trailer doesn't give you enough information and kind of capture your attention, you don't want to see the film. So that's what is happening when people are looking at your abstract. They are thinking about whether or not this research paper is what I need to research, or it's something interesting enough for me to look at the entire paper. Sorry. The wrong way. All right. Types of abstracts. We have two types of abstracts. You'll normally be doing one more than the other, but I'm going to explain both of them. You have a descriptive abstract. A descriptive abstract is summarizing just purposes and objectives, right? A descriptive abstract is just, we are looking at this particular phenomenon, and it won't have results or conclusions included, right? That type of abstract is often appropriate if you are presenting, let's say, at a school-based conference and you're allowed to submit research projects that are not yet completed. Right? That's an example of when you might use a descriptive abstract. An informative abstract is really what you will be doing most of the time. Generally, when you're doing a professional conference submission, or you are writing an abstract, of course, for your research paper for publication or otherwise, you are going to write an informative abstract. And that is an abstract that includes the purpose of the study, the methods used, the results, and the conclusions, right? You are giving a comprehensive overview of the study in just a few short sentences. So let's talk about those different parts, the structure of this abstract. First, you want to clearly state the research problem, right? I have an example there. This study aims to explore the impact of X on Y. It really is the thing that just kind of grabs you. You know, I was actually just looking through, you know, some particular abstracts. I was looking for things to post, and I'll share those later. Some example of some good abstracts. And one abstract said, you know, their statement of the problem was something like, there are no, at the time of this, you know, of this research, there are no helmets made specifically to protect high schoolers from injury, right? I don't write about sports. I don't have a child who plays football. You know, that is not necessarily something that is germane to me, but I like uninjured children. And it made me want to read the abstract and made me interested in the paper. Thought to myself, no, there isn't, right? They clearly stated what the problem was, and then they went on to address how they addressed that problem in their study, right? So you want to have that purpose, that objective. Why? Why are we looking at this study? Why are we looking at it? You know, what's important about it? What is this study, this piece of research aim to do? You also want in the abstract, again, yes, in that little 150 or 250 words, you also want to summarize your research design and approach. You want to have a little statement in there that examples your method section. You want to mention the key techniques that you use. Did you do interviews? Did you do observations? Did you send out a survey, right? So an example of how you might start a sentence like that is, we conducted a survey with 100 participants. That then lets the reader know, there were 100 people in this study and they all completed a survey, right? It's challenging sometimes to really be concise in language, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too, but it's a really great skill to have, right? So you really want to hit it with the purpose of the study. You want to talk about the methods that you use, and you want to have a little bit of information about the results. Now, if you're doing some huge, you know, a longitudinal study, or you have all kinds of data points, you can't include it all, right? Of course not. But you do want to highlight the most significant findings. What are the things, what are the juicy bits, again, think movie trailer, right, that would make somebody interested in your abstract and want to read the entirety of your paper. When you're talking about results in an abstract, you want to use numbers and data when they are applicable. But it's important to make sure, and I'll talk about this later too, to use the style guide for whatever style that you're required to write in. So I'm in psychology, right? I'm a psychologist and I'm in the psychology department. I teach in the psychology department. I present at psychological conferences. So I am using APA, right? The American Psychological Association Style Guide. You might be using the Chicago Style or MLA. Make sure you consult your style guide so that you know how to present information within the framework of your particular discipline, right? So an example of presenting your results are results indicated a significant increase in Y when X was, decreased, whatever that is, right? And however you want to talk about it. Because again, that's the part that makes people want to continue to read, right? Or continue to listen to your presentation or to admit you to the conference. You also want to have a little bit of a conclusion in there, right? Because remember, that's the juicy part. If you're writing a research paper, if you're reading research papers, the discussion, the conclusions, that's the part we really are interested in. Like, what does this mean? We found out what the problem was. We figured out how you studied it. We understand that this is what you found. But like, why is what you found important to the average reader or the person who is interested in this topic, right? Summarize the implications of your findings. So what does that mean now that we have parents' opinions, right, on the fact that there are no football helmets designed to keep their children safe when their children play high school football, right? What does that mean, for the general public? What does that mean for the sports community? What does that mean for orthopedic surgeons, whoever you're presenting it to? What does that mean? What are the implications of the findings, right? State how that research contributes to the field. Is there a gap in their literature? Right? Do we study again? My example is Black women's identity. So have we studied how women and feminist identity, deals with discrimination? Have we studied, how Black people in general or how men deal with us? Where's the space where we just study, that intersectional, piece of being Black and woman, in the United States and how they experience discrimination, right? Make sure you highlight that. That's part of your conclusion, right? How does your research contribute to the field, right? And you might say something like, this research provides insights into, right, etc. So some tips for writing the abstract. Please stick to the word limit. I'm gonna say that one more time. Please stick to the word limit. Because you might be thinking, 250 words is so short. I'm sure 262, when I need those extra 12 words, will be accepted. I am telling you, they often are not. Many times when you are applying for admission into conferences, you're actually typing it directly in, or even when you're uploading it, it is counting your words. You would hate for them to cut it off at 250 and you're missing, you have an incomplete sentence at the end, right? I know grant proposals also, they are serious about that word limit. So it takes practice. It takes practice to really audit your terminology. And this is why it's important also to work with a mentor, have other people read it, and also read other abstracts. My best advice to you when you're writing an abstract or a research paper in general is read more abstracts and research papers so you are exposed to that kind of concise, that budgeting of language that's going to be important to write a good abstract. Use clear language. This is very important, right? Try to avoid jargon. It's hard to do because many times we are using colloquialisms and we don't know we are using them, right? Because when we speak to one another, we all know it. So like I said, I'm in psychology. I might start writing about, and I do, I write about PTSD responses to viral videos of police shootings, right? When I first write about post-traumatic stress disorder, though, I have to say post-traumatic stress disorder and then put PTSD in parentheses next to it. Now I can continue to use PTSD, right? But you can't start off with PTSD assuming everybody knows what that is, because they might not. Everybody might not know what ADHD, means. And even, in some of the natural sciences, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I would have to spell that all the way out in my 250 words. The answer to that is yes. Right? You want to explain your acronyms before you start to use them, right? Now, this one is a little bit more tricky because sometimes, like I said, we use colloquial language and we don't always know it, right? We are all prone, I tell my students about this all the time, we're all prone to using our regional jargon, right? Where I grew up, we would say we drink pop and go to the show and we wear gym shoes, right? But because I am not in the Midwest presenting much of the time, I live in Georgia and many of the conferences that I am presenting are in Georgia. I have to think about how does that translate? Might they read what I think is everyday language? Might they read that and not understand the jargon that I'm using, right? So it's something to think about, right? Another point, please write in the proper tense, right? Again, certain styles are going to dictate particular tenses. Some styles are going to say, please write in past tense. Some styles are going to say, please write in present tense. Regardless, make sure that there's agreement in the tense you're writing. Don't start off in past tense and then end up in present tense. Just make sure that the tense agrees throughout the abstract, right? And very important, please revise and edit your abstract, right? An abstract that is thrown together at the last minute reeks of such, right? It is not, you don't fool anyone when that happens. So make sure you revise it several times. Make sure you review the content to make sure that it is coherent, it is clear, that your grammar, that your punctuation is on point, right? And also, again, that you're utilizing the style that is dictated by your discipline. And seek feedback from others, right? Take a second and give your abstract to another person and say, you know, what would you think about this if you're reading it? Would you be interested in that study? Is it clear what I'm even talking about, right? Many times when you are presenting at a conference where everybody is kind of in the same area, right? And I present at, you know, trauma or, you know, a Black women's psychology conference. We are often in the same area, but many times you are not. Many times it's interdisciplinary, or even people within your discipline may not understand kind of, you know, your catchphrases or the particular terms that you are using. So make sure that you are letting other people read it so that they can give you suggestions on how to make it a little bit more amenable and reader friendly. So some common mistakes to avoid when you are writing your abstract. You don't want to be too vague and you don't want to be too detailed. Well, that wasn't helpful. Sorry, even that sentence sounded vague. I'm going to explain, right? Identify the most important ideas that you want to bring out, right? What would I really want people to walk away with this abstract, but also with my paper in general? Because remember, it's a snapshot of the entire paper, right? You do want to provide support for those main points, but you don't want to be over-inclusive with irrelevant information, right? For example, people don't have to have several, you know, statements about how you came up with doing the study, right? We wondered about so-and-so, and then as a lab, we got together and we pooled some ideas. Right? You kind of want to hit it and talk about your research, right? Another mistake that we see a good deal when we are, and I've been in the abstract reading game for some time, not just with my students, but I've also read samples for people who are applying to graduate school. I've read grant applications and the like, right? So these are common mistakes I see in a lot of abstract writing, and we make them too, right? Professionals make them, students make them. We all need to, you know, sharpen our skills and make sure we stay on top of it, right? But failing to include results, right? There are times when a descriptive abstract is appropriate. We talked about that in the beginning. But for most research settings, your results should be included. It's kind of like, you know, trying to order a sandwich and not knowing what the insides are. You know what the bread is, you know what the condiments are, but you don't know what like the protein is between the slices. Without the results, you're kind of, you know, giving me a mayonnaise sandwich, right? And if you would like for people to take a bite of your research paper, you're going to have to give them the meat of it, right? Which is really the results part. So make sure you include those, unless, you know, you're writing a descriptive abstract. Even then, my 2 cents on that is if you are presenting, you know, research that isn't finished, say that. We are still in data collection. We have our target goal is 100 participants. We have 50, and the data is trending towards, or we hypothesize, you know, getting these results. It gives a little bit more to the reader other than, hey, we've given out some surveys. Come check it out, right? Another mistake that people often make in abstracts, and this is usually done by people who are in the camp of they don't have the 250 words. That the abstract might be, I know a couple of conferences, some might even require maybe even a 500 word abstract, and you're trying to fill the space, right? You don't really want to have quotes and citations in the abstract. Remember, the abstract is not a summary of the literature review. It is a summary of your research. So it should focus on your research and not necessarily the research of other people, right? It should be self-contained, right? It is an entity unto itself. It should be understandable without referencing several other sources, right? Another mistake that I think people make, and students certainly make this, quite often, is, we can kind of tell when people write an abstract before the paper is complete. Remember that the abstract is a concise summary of the paper. So when you're writing it before the paper is even at least drafted, you are probably missing some highlights of the paper. Right? Whenever I read an abstract and then there's so much meat in the paper and I'm going, why wouldn't that, be touched upon a bit in the abstract? That is how I know that the abstract was probably written before the paper was finished. So sometimes that's going to happen, right? Sometimes you are applying to present your research somewhere and the paper is not complete. No problem, right? But you do want to think about that. Draft a little bit, draft a few sentences about what the research and what the conclusions will probably say, even if it's not finished, and then use that to complete the abstract. So the abstract is comprehensive feeling, right? So some key points, all right, that we don't want to forget. Edit for clarity. Don't just edit for spelling errors, right? Edit it with the sense of, if I were picking up this particular piece of writing, what would I think about what was to come, right? That is how you know your abstract is clear and not confusing. I'm going to make this point again. Make sure you consult the writing style guide for your discipline. This is very important, right? Because what will happen is if you're going to publication, it could, knock your paper right out of consideration. It could knock your paper out of consideration also for presentation. Certain style guides also, they change. Remember, they change, a style guide will come out sometimes, a year later or every couple of years. This is important because you want people to be interested in your paper because of the abstract, not offended by your paper because of the abstract, because you're using terminology that is outdated. You are talking about things in a way that now has shifted and there's more humane or, politically correct, for lack of a better phrase, terms. You want to make sure that you are writing in a way that is palatable to the audience that you are trying to capture, right? And this might be my most important phrase on this entire slideshow. Please proofread your abstract. Please proofread it. Please proofread it. You might be thinking, I know what proofread means. Click on spell check, and then I'm going to chill out. Good start, right? Even programs like Grammarly or AI programs that are looking for, grammar and usage may still not be better than your own eyes. You know what you are trying to portray. You also know the style and the discipline from which you are writing. So there are certain, common phrases, for example, in psychology for sure, that are flagged by editors, that are flagged by AI, checkers and spell checking, or not flagged when they need to be, right? Because, it's only utilizing what it knows, at that very moment about how to write about something, right? So you have to proofread it, and you have to proofread it with a time span longer than 3 seconds after you just wrote it. We've all been there. We've all been there. We throw it together in a few seconds and you read it over real quick, it's good to go, right? You'll be surprised what you catch when you put a thing down for a couple of days and then you pick it back up. Right? Put something down for a little bit and then pick it back up. You'll be surprised what you catch. Remember, if you're reading it right after you wrote it, of course it sounds clear because those are your thoughts. Of course, it doesn't look like there's a lot of mistakes in there because your mind is still in that same mistake, making mode. You have to give yourself a minute and then pick it back up in order to proofread it so that it will read well, right, to other people who are reading it. Right. So I'm going to kind of explain these references a little bit slowly because I don't know if you will have your hands on this PowerPoint, but you might just need to take a picture of this or a screenshot. These are some sites that I highly recommend when you are trying to write a good abstract. Now, the first one is the bias-free guide. It is APA's. You might be writing in a different style, but APA is very good about staying in front of bias-free language. So for example, you might find old abstracts and things that I've even written that might say something like, there were 10 autistic kids. Well, we don't say that anymore. We say children with autism. If you're ever wondering about whether or not the language that you're using to describe sexual orientation, the language you're using to describe race or ethnicity, anything like that is biased, I like to think of it this way. Always make sure you are talking about a person as a person, right? Once you're talking about them like they're a disorder, like they're just, there's a difference in saying, gay male participant and the gays. You hear that difference, right? I promise you, it's like it hurts my ear anytime somebody says the Blacks. Now, is that in itself a racially pejorative term? Well, no, I guess not. But, the Blacks just has a sound to it, right? And so you don't want to use that when you are submitting your abstract for grant research or to be included in a conference. You really want people to think, if you've done research in this population, you would know not to say the Blacks. You would know not to say the gays, right? You want people to know that you have done due diligence, right, in presenting information in the most humane and acceptable and inclusive way as possible. So I really like this bias-free guide. When you click on it, it actually has different places you can go and to figure out kind of the language of today. I will be honest with you, I sat on a committee of a school that is here in Atlanta, a very popular school that lots of people try to go for graduate school or to be hired and an applicant's use of the word, they sent in a writing sample. It was like a little bit longer than an abstract, and their use of a particular word, which while isn't a slur per se, it's just outdated. And he was not admitted, he was not called in for an interview. I was in the room when people said, something about him saying this word over and over again, because it was just an outdated term, right? So you don't want that to happen to you. So please make sure you look up your bias-free language and utilize it. And again, you might be thinking, but the Blacks is easier to write. Writing people of African descent or Black people, that's going to take more words. The answer to that is yes. Yep. And so you're going to have to improve your skill set because that's what's going to be required, right? The next one here is are just a couple of style guides. I like what Purdue has. I've always utilized them in my classes. They have quick links to the most recent whatever guide you're using, Chicago, MLA, APA. So I like to include that. The next link is actually from Michigan State University. It is, they just have a list of student abstracts that, they've collected over the years, but they're discipline specific. So if you're in the natural sciences or you're in chemistry and your abstract really will have a lot of numbers or data or have a lot of acronyms, it's, there are examples there to explain how you can talk about those things. It has the social sciences, it has how to write fine arts and presentation abstracts. So I really like that link. The next one is a handout, just kind of literally giving you format, like, breaking down, here's where this sentence could go, here's where this sentence can go. So if you need help really kind of formatting the abstract, that's a good link for that. And the last link is just has some creative examples. So, I know I talked about writing about the purpose and the methods and the research, the results and the conclusions kind of in a particular order. They often will be in that order, but you don't necessarily have to write in that order. If you would like, and I'm prone to that, I'll be honest with you, I'm prone to the catchy title and, kind of a grab you sentence. You have some license to put a little bit of your own creativity in there. For example, the helmet abstract that I was talking about. They could have started with that. I just was kind of skimming the abstract. And at the end, that was a conclusion. Like to date, there are no, clear safety precautions in the making of helmets to ensure, the safety of high school football players. Fine. What if they said that right at the beginning? Right. So that's a creative way to still hit the major points and still kind of, express yourself creatively but still stay within your word limit. And you are making sure you are covering all the things you need to cover in the abstract. So there's about 10 or so examples on that link. And I've left this up for some time on purpose to make sure that if you are rewriting those links or you are taking a picture of it, whatever the case may be, you can get that information. I highly recommend those. But of course, you can also just Google, a well-written abstract. Just make sure that you are looking at examples that are more akin to the kind of writing that you're doing. So for example, again, I'm not going to recommend that my students look at kind of any old abstracts. I want them to look at abstracts that are coming from psychology journals. I want them to look at abstracts that use APA style, because that is what's going to be required for them to go to conferences, to present in places. That's going to be required when they apply for psychology graduate programs. You will have to do the same for your particular discipline. So hopefully I have been helpful in your abstract writing. Like I said, it's the piece of information that is guaranteed to be published, right? In any conference, whether it's a student-based conference that's on campus, or it is at a regional or national or even international conference, they always publish the proceedings and your abstract is published. So that is something that is in print and, kind of will live forever. So you really want that abstract to really capture people and sell your research paper. Thank you.